folks, so today I wanted to cover throwing off the hump. So what I've done is I've just wedged up this is probably a 4 or 5 pound piece of clay. I didn't spend any time really centering it. You can see that my fingers are being bumped around, so this is definitely not a centered piece of clay, and for throwing off the hump, that's the beauty of it. It's great for making multiples of small items like little mother's vases or bud vases. So these were all thrown off this hump that I'm still working with. So there's 8, 9, 10 pieces already, and I'll probably get, I don't know, 6 or 7 more out of this. And this was about a 7 pound piece of clay, maybe 8 pounds to start with, just to give you an idea. So we'll just go over the methods for throwing off the hump. So the thing that you need to do is decide how much clay you want to use for the piece that you want to make. And for these bud vases, I'm just making them totally all different, an assortment. So what we're doing is just centering the very top part of the clay that you're actually going to work with. So you can see I'm just kind of squeezing in a section. It is challenging when you're first learning this method because you're working with much smaller amounts of clay. So you're going to be using your fingertips and fingers in ways that we don't normally use them, and we usually use our whole hands for throwing. So you just need to do a little modification and keep practicing. So now I've got this small piece on the top centered. I'm going to go ahead and dig my hole. Normally I would use more than 1 finger for a normal size piece, but for throwing off the hump, small piece, 1 finger. And then once I've got that hole, here's the step that can get a little tricky, because you need to designate an area that's going to become the base of the piece so that you know where to wire that piece off, because if you're unsure, then you end up cutting through the bottom, which is I've done many times before and still occasionally do. So based on the depth that my finger is inside, I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of undercut, kind of squeeze in and undercut an area so that it's really obvious now where I'm gonna run that wire. And I found that that just helps me for future. And then I'm gonna start to bring my walls up. And I'll show you a couple of little vases just so you can kind of get the rhythm of things. I'm going a little slower with the pace than I normally would, so you can hopefully get the gist of it. And the thing I find, this is another great way to do teapot spouts. I do my teapot spouts like this. So it's not just for multiples of things, it can also be for assembly, things that need to be put together. The thing you want to be careful of as well is trapping too much water inside, because it's hard and it's a challenge to get the water out. So once I've got the height that I want, I'm going to go back in with my sort of flexible sponge and just scoop out the water. And the other thing you'll find, which is very normal, is you'll end up with an uneven rim, like you get this little jog in the rim, and we're going to cut that down later, so I'm not too concerned with that. So I'm just really wetting my outside hand at this point. I'm going to go for shaping. Just give this guy a little bit of a shape and squeeze the collar of the piece in a little bit. This is also a great way to try out new forms that you want to work with on a larger scale, but you don't want to waste a bunch of clay not knowing if you're going to like the shape of something. It's a great way to kind of sketch, which that's what I use it for as well, because I don't sketch with pen and paper. So I'm going to come back and cut down this rim. So I hold my needle tool like a pencil to start with, and then I hold a finger along the bottom edge. So I have total control. And then another finger goes inside. So I can feel when that needle tool comes through, and then you just lift up. I'm going to give this one more little squeeze. These little mother's vases, I call them mother's vases, are great for like the single stem flower bud vase type of thing. All right, so once I'm happy with the form of the piece, the shape of the piece, I'm going to come back and use my angled knife to cut away the excess to kind of exaggerate that shape a little bit further down. Take away some of the excess. You can also use a small rib tool. I love these flexible red ribs from Mud Tools, Cheryl Mud Tools. These are my go-to. And I do trim these. I have chucks. I'll show you in a second. but I flip them over to trim them in. And then I'll cut right underneath. And you can lift it right up and set it down on a tile. I use old floor tiles, which work really, really great. But this is what my chucks look like. I've got these in a bunch of different shapes. These are just wheel thrown, bisque fired pieces that have a nice smooth inner edge, so that when those pieces are ready to be trimmed, I flip them over inside, I attach the chuck to the wheel, and the bottoms of those little vases get trimmed really easily. So let's do one more. And we'll do one a little bit bigger just so you can see. You can do, you know, tumblers this way, multiple whiskey cups. I throw a lot of things in my shop off the hump just because it's so nice to not have to clean the wheel, you know, go back, center a new piece of clay, all that business. It eliminates a few steps out of the process. Leave the mouth of this one a little more open. Do a little angled rim. And then again, back with the angled knife. And you can see how quick this process is for small things. So that is throwing off the hump. I will use this piece all the way down until I have a small piece left on the bottom. Sometimes that small piece gets a little funky because it's absorbed the most amount of water from having sat on the wheel the longest. So don't be attached to the very last piece that you may get off the hump. But as you can see, it is a great way to do multiples. So have fun with it. Feel free to reach out to me at theveganpotter.com if you have other questions or other demos you want to see.